All right. Welcome, everybody. Just about to get started. All right, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to the GRADflix training session. My name is Rachel Hickey. I'm the Events and Communications Specialist here at GSPA, and I'm happy to be your host and moderator for today's session. So this session will cover all of the tools you need to create a 60-second video, including all the GRADflix guidelines, copyright considerations, video best practices, scripting, technology tools, and more. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you. And if you haven't already registered, we encourage you to do so. And we will put a link through the chat that will lead you to the registration page, which the registration deadline is closing in a couple of weeks, November 20th. So just be aware of that. All right. I'm going to. All right, so just to do a territorial acknowledgement, we at GSPA believe that a public acknowledgement of the traditional territory upon which we all live is an important step towards reconciliation. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the, oh shoot, sorry guys. I'll go back. And I just need to minimize that. Okay. Much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract and the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Our active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within our Indigenous Initiatives Office. And if you're interested in learning more about the Indigenous Initiatives Office, please visit their webpage, and we'll also put that link through the chat. So for today's session, this is what we're looking at for the agenda. We're going to cover what is GRADflix, and that will be presented by Angela Brooke, Manager of Graduate and Postdoctoral Experience. We'll also be talking about why you should consider participating, and this bit will be presented by Sadaf Faisal, a former competitor. Then we will be looking at how to actually create your 60-second video. That'll be presented by Sarah Howard, our Graduate Student Experience Specialist. Then we're going to talk about communicating your research in your 60-second video, and that'll be presented by Elise Vist, Writing and Multimodal Communication Specialist, Speaking and Digital Communication Resources at the Writing Communication Center. And finally, we're going to talk about copyright tips presented by Lauren Bile, Copyright and Licensing Librarian here at UWaterloo. And finally, we'll end with a live Q&A with our panelists. So before I turn it over to Angela to talk about what GRADflix is, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes. So this session will be recorded, so we can share it with those who weren't able to make it live today. So the video will be posted on our GRADflix webpage by next Friday, or as soon as it's closed captioned, and a link will be shared with those who have registered through email. And we'll also send a link through the chat of that GRADflix web page where you can see the video after it has been posted. You'll see that there's a Q&A option. You can submit your questions at any time through the chat, but we will be taking and answering these questions at the end during the question and answer session after the presentations are done. This is with an exception of the why participate section with Sadaf presenting. She's only joining us for that bit of the presentation. So if you would like to ask Sadaf a question, make sure you put that in before she leaves. You may also notice that we're sending some links through the chat. So the chat feature is turned off for you participants today. This is so we don't miss any questions that sometimes get missed, but you will see these links coming through and you can stay engaged that way. And then finally, there will be a survey you will be prompted to fill out after the meeting ends today. So we encourage you to fill that out. Your feedback is greatly appreciated, and I will remind you again before we end. So I can pass it along now to Angela Rook, who's going to talk about what is GRADflix.
Thank you, Rachel. Looks like you'll just have to stop sharing your screen before I can share mine. Thanks. Okay, and if Rachel, you could just nod if you can see my screen or my screen share. Perfect. Yep. Thank you. All right. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm so excited to be launching our GRADflix competition for 2020, 2021 in this time where we are, this crazily disrupted world with COVID and right now the US election. I'm just so happy to be looking forward to the GRADflix competition. This is one of my favorite things that we run in GSPA. And I'm just so thrilled to have such interest this year. And I really encourage you all to sign up, make sure you submit that registration, not just attend the training session so that you get all of our communications. And I can't wait to see your videos every year, year after year. Our team is so impressed with what you managed to submit to us. We are so excited. Every time we get a new video in, we kind of gather around the computer and watch it together. We're so excited to see what you've come up with. And especially because we know that many of you are not video experts. You've never done this before. And that's what makes it that much more impressive. So I just want to encourage you to actually follow through, create a video. It's such a fun experience. And I'm so thrilled that we have Siddharth here to talk to you about her experience. But before we jump into that, I'll just sort of go over what the competition is, what it's about, and what you can expect if you actually follow through and register. So what is GRADflix? First of all, it's a relatively new GSPA initiative. We launched it in 2018. You may have heard that we've run other kinds of research communication initiatives like the 3-minute thesis competition. That wasn't invented by us. It was actually invented by an institution in Australia, as well as Grad Talks is something that we typically run when we're all on campus. The beauty of GRADflix is that it was always a digital communication sort of initiative. And so it allows us to continue to run it even though we're not on campus. This is not a public speaking competition, but it is a research communication event and competition, and that allows you to still proceed even though we're all working from home, and many of you might not even be here in Canada, and this still allows you to compete. So we're very excited that we were already prepared to launch this really cool thing in COVID times. So it is research communication initiative. The idea is that you create a 1-minute video, not any longer, not even a second longer. And it can be a moving slideshow or it can be an animation, but the key thing is no more than 60 seconds, and that it has to describe your research. So videos can take many forms, but it must include movement of some kind and sound of some kind. And to be eligible to participate in GRADflix, you must meet the criteria listed here. So the main thing is that you're a graduate student in a research program, which means you're either eventually going to complete a thesis or a master's research paper. And if you happen to be a grad student who's already completed all of your degree requirements, we still will allow you to compete provided you have not yet convocated. The video itself has to focus on research conducted for your thesis, MRP, or dissertation in your current program. So if you just finished a master's program at that big university down the 401 and you're here doing your PhD, we don't want you to present on the research you did for your master's program. If you're a PhD student here, you have to be presenting on the research you're conducting here as a graduate student at the University of Waterloo. And the other key thing is that you have to agree to allow your video to be made public. We do a lot of work to get this out there on social media. Everything will be posted online. And this is sort of the strength of this competition is it gets picked up and people see it, and you're almost creating like a 1-minute commercial for your research and your work and you as a graduate student and potential future employee. So when you submit your video, we'll also need you to provide some additional information. So your preferred name. So if you like to go by another name other than the one listed on our Quest system, for example, your preferred pronouns, the name of your supervisor or supervisors, and we will need a good quality portrait or headshot photograph. Nowadays, with the quality of your cell phones, that will be good enough quality. You'll just want someone else to take it so it doesn't look like a selfie. And then we will need a short biography of between 60 and 100 words as well to accompany the content that we'll eventually be putting on our website. So these will be judged. So typically, there's usually about 20-ish videos that make it to the final competition. So the judges look over all of the videos individually, and anyone that has a high enough score, we're not stuck on 20, it could be 20 to 25. Any videos that has a high enough score to move on to the final competition will do so, and this is the judging criteria that's used. As you can see, it's focused primarily on communication. This is ultimately a communication competition, but creativity and visual impact comprises 30% and technical quality 20%. You could have the best written script of all of the videos, but if we can't hear you or there's too many distracting things happening in the video, you know, that's where the technical quality piece comes in. And I know that this isn't your primary motivator, but for those of you that make it to the final competition, there are some cash prizes up for grabs. As you can see, we have 5 prizes in total, including a People's Choice Award. So in theory, you could win a People's Choice Award as well as one of the placed prizes. And so at the showcase event, that's where the audience will be able to vote for the People's Choice winner. So I've listed some of our important dates here. Right now we're November 5th, we're at the GRADflix training session. The registration is already open, which is why we keep encouraging you to follow through, finish the registration as well. And the deadline to register is November 20th. So make sure you get that registration in by then. And it doesn't mean you have to have anything done by that point. We just need to, you're basically just telling us that you want to compete, and that way we can email you with any important information that comes through. After the registration deadline, we're actually going to be doing 2 quick feedback drop-in sessions where you can show us drafts of what you're working on. You can show us a draft of your video or your script, or if it's, you know, some animation you're working on, if you're struggling with something, you don't even need to register. We'll allow you to kind of come, just pop in as needed, and we'll be there ready to help. And that's just to make sure you don't get discouraged if you're struggling with 1 or 2 things. And then the actual video submission deadline is January 8th at 9 a.m. sharp. Always recommend doing it the day prior to the deadline in case of technical difficulties. And we will be hosting the virtual showcase event later in January. So that gives us time to sort of take your video, insert a title slide, an end slide, things like that, to introduce your video and put everything together into a virtual showcase. Now, this year is going to look a little bit different. I'll show you a couple of pictures. Historically, we have a big event. We rent a red carpet. There's popcorn and wine and cheese. This year, we are trying to do our best to get that film festival fun vibe into a virtual event. So stay tuned for details about that. But overall, I just want to encourage you to participate. You know, it's such a fun event. Our students have said that it's connected them with students in other disciplines. They've you know, been able to post their video, share it on social media and on their LinkedIn profiles, and they've had employers reach out to them and opportunities for research collaborations. So you know, it's fun, you have a chance to win a prize, and it's great for your professional development. So that is my pitch, and with that, I will stop sharing and pass it back over to Rachel.
Great. Thank you, Angela, for sharing that. Now I'm going to pass the floor to Sadaf, who is a past competitor and winner, and she's here to talk to us about her experience. And just a reminder that she's only joining us for this little portion, so if you do have a question, go ahead and throw that in the Q&A right now, and then we'll take a little bit of a moment to answer those questions after she's done. So go ahead, Sadaf.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here and sharing my experience. I'm really excited, and I wish all the participants good luck for the competition. It was a fun experience. I enjoyed it a lot. So I don't have a formal presentation. I'm so sorry. I just had a really busy week and I just didn't get time. So I'll rather answer your questions if you have anything. I'll just give a little bit of a background. So my name is Sadaf. I'm a PhD candidate at School of Pharmacy in Kitchener campus. I took part in the GRADflix competition last year, and I was the winner, which was something that I wasn't expecting, but it was a really fun and proud moment for me. The reason I decided to participate in the challenge was I really wanted to see how can I say everything that I'm doing in 60 seconds. I think that was the thing that really inspired me because, sometimes when you are with other people, you're in a conference, you met someone and the person asks you what you're doing, you actually explain to them, right? And sometimes you don't have a lot of time. So just summarizing everything in 60-minute video was something that really motivated me to take part. The second important thing was I believe in knowledge translation a lot. So especially in health research, if you can't tell the people who are not who don't have any research background what you're doing in a layman language, I think that is the first step in connecting the research world with the real world. So I think that was another thing that I really wanted to see if I can do that. So those were the two major things that actually drove me to take part in the competition. I encourage every grad student to take part because we are doing so many cool things at UW, so many cool projects, and if you're not gonna tell the world what you're doing, I think it's kind of you are being not nice to yourself. So just go out there and explain to people in a layman language what you're doing. So I think that would be my pitch for you guys. Other than that, yes, you do get famous. Your video will be on the YouTube. People will share it. You will share it with your friends and everyone. I shared my video to my first boss, who I worked almost 18 years ago with him. And then he was so excited to see the video. So those kind of things really make the whole process fun. So I don't know what else should I say. My research project is about the smart technologies used for the medication management in older adults. So there was a lot of jargons, right? The medical jargons that people don't understand. So that was one thing that I tell everyone, that when you create a video, try to show it to someone who does not have any background. So what I did, I showed my video to my kids and I told them, do you understand what I'm doing? And then they provided me feedback. Another thing that is that if you when you are making the video, just make sure that you listen to it a couple of times, because sometime when we have recorded something and when you hear yourself, it's not a nice experience. I don't like hearing myself when I record myself because it sounds weird. So just try to when the time when you become comfortable with the video, I think that's the time where you'll be like, okay, it's all ready. So if you keep looking at it or keep editing it, it's gonna go each time you're gonna find something. So the time when you feel comfortable enough, that's the time when your video is ready. I see some questions in Q&A.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions coming in, so we have time for a couple, so maybe I'll just ask you some, Sadaf. Sure. So we have someone wondering how much time you spent preparing the video. I know a lot of people don't have a lot of experience making videos, but how much time would you say you spent making it?
So I didn't have any background or any knowledge about like video making or video editing at all. I did make like PowerPoint presentations for my research and for my work, but that was the only experience I had. So I don't think I spent a lot of time. I think the same timeline was last year. So I think we had our first session somewhere around the first week of November. And then I kind of made my video, I would say give and take. I would just say like within a 1 week, like I didn't spend like a whole day on the video. So the steps that I took was that first I sat down and I wrote what I wanted to show in that video. That was the first step. And once you know your material, it's very easy to gather it. So I think the hardest thing, or the thing that will take most of your time, would be to sit down and make your write your like something like manuscript, right? That you're kind of sitting down and you're saying, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about. Once you do that, then the next couple of things, they usually happens very quickly.
Cool. We have a couple people who are curious what you use to edit your video, and kind of, was it animation? Was it speaking? What did it kind of look like?
So I used a Powton. It's like a platform that you can use. I think there was a charge involved. I think it cost me like $80 or something like that. I just took like 1 month subscription for that. And then I canceled my subscription after my video was all done. I saved it and then I canceled my subscription after that. They allowed, like, there is some templates that you can use. I didn't use any of their templates. I actually did Scratch from there, but they have really cool animations that you can use it. I will put the link in the chat if you guys want to just take a look at the video. That's what I use, Powton. But I know that some people, they only use PowerPoint, because in the PowerPoint, you have the ability to make an animated video. I just like their whiteboard template, was really cool.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing, and sharing that in the chat would be super helpful. We'll just do one quick last question for you before you leave. And that is, do you think that the competition would still have been valuable for you to participate in, even if you didn't win?
Yes, I would. Like, even like, I wasn't, to be very honest, I wasn't even expected to, like, win, because I was like, this is just first time I'm taking part in something. And it was just the whole fun activity that I really enjoyed. And especially when you tell people what you're doing in a layman language, I think that's the most important part, because we usually struggle with explaining to people. Like, for example, if someone is from an engineering background and he would be telling me stuff about, like, how he developed a software, I would not be able to understand. Similarly, people who have a healthcare background, like for us, using the medical jargon is a very common thing that we do in our day-to-day activities. But with this one, now after I took part in this competition, it was very easy for me to tell people when they say, oh, what are you working on? So I would just tell me kind of the same script that I used for my video, which is in a very easy language, and you can easily understand my methods, what I'm trying to achieve, why I'm doing it. I think those are the things that kind of, like, make the whole thing a fun event. And I really like the red carpet. I know because of COVID we can't have it this year, but it was a fun experience.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Sadaf. And that leads us into a great segue to our next portion of the presentation, which will be about how you actually make these videos. So thank you so much for joining us, Sadaf, and answering our questions. And I'll turn it over to Sarah. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, a huge thank you to Sadaf for joining us. I think it's always so helpful to hear from students and those who have actually participated in the competition. So I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. And Rachel, can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Perfect. Thanks. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some kind of tips and tricks for actually creating your GRADflix video. And this is all assuming that you do not have prior video creation experience. So hopefully by the end of my talk here, you will feel confident creating a video even if you don't have that experience. There's a lot of ways that even if you don't have that expertise, that you can really get started and make your own video. So before we get started, I'm just going to ask Rachel to launch a quick poll for me, just to see what kind of video options or types of videos our audience members today are aware of. So you should see that poll pop up there. we'll just give a little bit of time for everyone to respond, and then Rachel will be able to show us all what the results are for that. All right. Do we have some? Oh, perfect. All right, so we have our results here now. So it looks like almost everyone is familiar with animation style videos. That's great. That would be the type that staff used. Many people are familiar with live action, stop motion, mixed media, and then fewer familiar with screencast. And I see some of you are familiar with other types as well. So that's great. These are the main types of kind of options that I'll go over really quickly, and I'll also show some examples. So for those of you who aren't familiar with these types of videos, you'll get to see what some of them look like. Okay, so the first example here is of a live action video recording. This is from Hayden's GRADflix video from 2020.
Hey Hayden, what's up?
Oh, hey, come here. I'm just researching how and in what ways German architects, citizens, and urban planners rebuilt the beautiful city of Munich.
Rebuilt?
Yeah, come check it out.
Yeah, so live action video, I think, is the first kind of thing that comes to mind when many of us think of videos. It would be actually recording something that's either the physical environment or people or someone that's actually there. And usually in this case, Hayden's actually talking in person, but it can also be using voiceover if the person isn't actually in the footage itself. So the next type of kind of main option that we see people can use is a screencast. This is something that you may have seen now that we're all in remote learning. I know some teachers or professors may be using this kind of a video to help explain different lesson plans. So the example I have here is from Tina Chan's 2019 GRADflix entry.
Players control avatars through a narrative, where they offer empathy to in-game characters to progress play as we measure engagement. This is the first study on whether gamification with narratives and avatars can encourage peer support for mental health.
So you can see that Tina also used a little bit of a mix of different methods. She had a little bit of a video of someone's hand actually typing, so she had some live action, and then she kind of moved into a little bit of, just animation and text at the end. But she had a lot of that screen capture for the actual game that was being played. So screen capture can be good if you're doing something in your research that's actually on the computer. If we take photos or videos of a computer screen, you can tend to have some glare. So this is a great option if there's something right on your computer that you want to include in your video. So the next option that we'll talk about is animation. So in animation, we have those animated cartoon figures explaining or doing something usually with voiceover. If you watch Sadaf's video later, you'll see a longer example. I just have a few seconds here from Hassan's 2020 GRADflix video as a quick example.
I will start by researching the effects of a children's magazine on speech and language development. Towards that aim, I will conduct a qualitative study involving interviews with children, teachers, and scholars. Finally, I will prepare a prototype by applying the findings I have obtained.
So one thing that you might see here that could be really nice about using an animation as opposed to live videos is you have a lot of flexibility in terms of, the backgrounds that you want to use, the amount of people that might be in the animation. I know right now with COVID, it might not be possible to go out and do live action videos, especially if you want to have a large number of people kind of captured. So this can be a good option where you can pull those types of things in, get the visual that you want in a way that's realistic in the time that we're living in right now.
I will start by
and another type, we didn't see any of these in our first year of the GRADflix competition, but in 2020 we had 2 people that used a stop motion style of video. So this is where one frame is captured at a time in images or pictures, and then they're all kind of blended together into a video. So here's the example from Megan's 2020 GRADflix submission.
Peatlands are a special type of wetland made up of layers of plant matter. Plants in peatlands take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it in their tissues. When they die, the water stops them from decomposing and releasing that carbon. This keeps it out of the air where it would become carbon dioxide or methane, two of the greenhouse gases that cause global warming.
So you can see in this example, Megan took lots of different photos with slight changes in between them. And then if you kind of have that regular kind of change between the pictures, you get this slowly moving kind of video showing all the different stages together. One other reason I really like Megan's example is because she drew everything herself. So when we think of videos and animations, we often think of things that we construct on the computer. But for those of you that have artistic skills, this is another option for you to actually draw and create the different images that you want to use.
Peatlands are...
And then, well, there are these different options. You can also intermingle them. So you can use what's called a mixed media type of video where you have all sorts of different, maybe you have some animation, maybe you have some still images, some live footage. You can mix these all together to create the kind of video that might best suit your project. So there are lots of different examples of videos that have used this throughout GRADflix. And even those like Tina's that use some screen captures, you could see it also used that live footage and some just text and graphics. So you can really mix and mingle with the different styles of videos depending on what you think will suit what you're trying to convey in your video. So those are the different types of videos. So now we'll get into a little bit of some solutions for first-time video creators to actually create these different styles of videos. So I'm just going to ask Rachel to launch our second poll here. Just to kind of capture what skills or tools you might already have to be able to create your videos. So it's great to be able to use those things that we already have instead of starting from scratch sometimes and learning something new, especially if you might feel like you're a little bit short on time. So Rachel will be able to show us those results once everyone's had a chance to vote. Okay, so everyone has a smartphone. It looks like everyone who participated also has used PowerPoint before, and a little over half of you have some artistic abilities to be able to draw, sketch, or create graphics. So this is great. You already have a really good start if you're trying to create a video for GRADflix. So for those of you with a smartphone, you probably have already taken lots of videos or photos with your phone, and most smartphones now can actually record really good quality photos and videos. So this can be a really great option for you in using that to film your video. For those of you that have used PowerPoint, you may or may not be familiar with the fact that PowerPoint actually can use animations and built-in timings. And then you can actually export PowerPoints as a video. So you can create a full video right in PowerPoint without, taking the time to learn any other types of software. And I will talk a little bit more about what you can do in PowerPoint later on. And then all of you who have those artistic abilities to draw, sketch, or create graphics, you can actually create your own images, which can be really nice. Sometimes it can be hard to, capture on a photo or on a video exactly what it is you want to show to your audience. And so if you can actually create that yourself, that can be a really added bonus. So the first question I thought of when I heard people suggesting making a video with a phone was, does that really work? I mean, I think of my phone as something that I use for short little snippets of videos or photos and not for something high quality. So we did some research, and in fact, high profile directors have shot whole films using the iPhone. There's also a mobile film festival that's been running since 2005. Similar to GRADflix, they create 1-minute videos using a mobile phone. And if they've been doing this since 2005, our phones have definitely improved since then. So they do definitely have the capability to create really good videos. And we also, our first year to test out, how does this work? Is it user friendly? Our co-op student actually was able to create a 1-minute video entirely on her smartphone in less than 4 hours, and that included some filming and editing. So it's definitely something that's feasible using that technology you already have. If you're wanting to edit live action videos, I know some of our participants in the past have created their whole video as one smooth 60-second shot, which has its own challenges that I'll mention later. But most of you will probably be wanting to do some editing, even if it's just, taking off a second or two at the beginning from the time you click record until someone starts talking or at the end. So there are lots of options for you to be able to do that kind of simple editing on really free software. Most editing software will allow you to quiet or mute sounds in your video clips, speed things up or slow them down, splice it, so separate out your recording, and a lot more. You can usually also add text over photos or videos and use any kind of basic editing techniques. So if you want something in black and white, for example, or cropping things, that can all be done in nearly all video editing softwares. And there's some examples there. You will get the slides after, so I won't go through those, but if you're wanting to take a look at that after, they are on the slides. For those of you thinking of doing some kind of screencast, there are free and paid versions of Screencast-O-Matic, which can allow you to create screen captures and also have a picture-in-picture effect, which is where your webcam or you would also be in the screen. You can also add narrations. If you're familiar with PowerPoint, you can also do that directly in PowerPoint. You just can't have that picture-in-picture effect where the image from your webcam is also added unless it's already on your screen. All right, so there are lots of different animation makers if this is something you're interested in. Sadaf indicated that she used Powtoon. There are a few other options. These typically do have some fee if you want to have the brand watermarks taken off and if you want to be able to export in a really high quality, but all of them have free trials. So I'd encourage you that if you're interested in these, you could take just try them out using those free trials or signups. They also tend to be really user-friendly, which is nice. And I have the basic costs on there as well. If you're interested, you can generally pay for just 1 month and then like Sadaf did, cancel your subscription after that. Okay. For anyone interested in using or in doing a stop motion video where you're taking all those pictures and putting them together, there's a couple options for you there as well. Again, PowerPoint would also work for this if you just have videos with the slide transitions automatically in there. Okay, so for those of you that are familiar with PowerPoint and maybe don't want to be learning how to use some more complicated video editing tools, PowerPoint allows you to add any kind of text or images, multiple video and audio files, and movement and transition for any of those aspects. Simple editing can also happen right in PowerPoint. So you've probably already done, some editing to photos that you've put in so you can crop them. You're also able to trim audio and video files right in PowerPoint, and you can record audio right from in there as well. So you don't have to use another application to record any type of voiceover you might be using. You're then able to export that using all of your timings and narration as a full quality video. So this can be, like I mentioned, a really good option if you don't have experience with other video editing software. It is fairly basic, but can do most things that you would need to do. So I have a quick example here of a video that was put together in PowerPoint. It's our GRADflix teaser. So as you can see, there's a wide variety of different things in there. There's the text, you can see the videos, sound that wasn't part of the videos as well. So lots of different things that you can do in there. And if you're running into trouble, you can also always attend our drop-ins, and I'm happy to help with some of those things during the drop-in. I know we had a few people join us last year who were working in PowerPoint, and that was really useful for them. Okay, so a few tips, tricks, and best practices to take your video to the next level. So most of us know how to record the video. There's some basic editing, but a few things that can really help improve the quality. All right, so before you get started, consider what is the best or most feasible type of video for your content. As I mentioned, maybe right now you're not really able to go and take some live action footage of what you're researching because of COVID restrictions. So think about, what's going to be the most feasible for you at this time. Planning is really key. When you go and start recording, if you haven't done any planning ahead of time, sometimes you realize that, oh, there's, things going on that I didn't think of. And so having a bit of a script or a storyboard before you get started can really make your actual filming or putting together of your video go a lot more smoothly. I know Elise will probably talk a lot more about these kinds of things, but make sure that as you're using images, use them to illustrate or reinforce what you're saying. Make sure that there's that complement between the audio and the visuals. And I really encourage you to aim to sound authentic rather than perfect as well. I know as you're creating your script and you're filming, there can be a lot of pressure to, say your script exactly right. But I encourage you to think about things like making sure you're looking at the camera and having that authenticity to your recordings rather than just making it perfect. If you're recording anything live, I'd really encourage you to take extra shots. It's much easier to trim video or go through a few extra recordings than it is to go back and re-record or start again. And as I mentioned, some of our past competitors have done really well with videos that are filmed right from the beginning to the end, that full 60 seconds in one shot. But they have admitted that that was tricky. Some of them took 20, 30, 40 shots before they got that perfect 60 seconds. So if there's ways that you're able to maybe just film 20 seconds at a time instead of the full 60, that can really help with that. Oh, and I see Elise has added something about authenticity to the chat as well. That's great. Thanks, Elise. Oh, and that's just all panels, so we will make sure that we share that link with all the attendees as well. All right, a few other important filming considerations. Audio quality is really important. As Angela mentioned, 50% of the judging is based on communication. And so if you're sharing your script verbally and people can't hear you, it's really important that you try to make that as clear as possible because that will really impact your score. So a few considerations. One is consider doing a voiceover instead of a talking head. So being a person actually talking in the video, just so that you can be closer to your microphone when you're talking. Or if you have access to different microphones, try to use those. You can also think about your recording environment. So do you have fans or space heaters that are creating a lot of that white noise? Consider turning them off when you're actually doing your recording just to get that better clarity. And if possible, avoid recording outside. I think we've all had that situation where we're talking on the phone with someone outside and it's really windy and it's impossible to hear. So same if you're recording any audio outside. The last two things are stability and lighting. It's really important for your video to try to have things as stable as possible, both so your viewers aren't getting dizzy if your camera is moving all over the place, but also it just helps reduce those distractions. If, for example, if it's going from light to dim, that can really distract your audience from, what you're trying to communicate. So trying to keep things stable and steady can be helpful. A few tips around editing and exporting once you get to that stage. If you are doing video clips without any audio and then adding voiceover, make sure that you mute the actual video clip. Otherwise, you'll get the white noise from that video, which can disrupt from the clarity of your voiceover. You can also consider adding in background music or sound effects in addition to any kind of voiceover or talking as appropriate. Make sure, though, that these don't take away from your narration, don't drown anything out, and really add to your overall video. As you're taking photos and videos and putting them in, editing them in, try to make sure that they're all the same dimensions and orientation as well. That just avoids, having that extra black kind of outline on either sides of your photos if they are in a different dimension. When you do get to exporting, we recommend that you choose the highest quality export you're able to. So we'd recommend 720p or higher as the option that you choose. This does mean it's a really big file, but that is much better for the viewing of it. We also ask that you export or convert it to an MP4 file. That is the file type that's required for your submission to make sure that we're able to view your video properly. All right, a few quick editing tips before I wrap up. If you are noticing that some of your audio is a bit quiet, there are options to actually increase the volume level after it's been recorded. There's an example of a free option for that. Just to caution though that at some point it does decrease the quality of your audio as well. So I'd recommend that you first focus on those audio quality tips, removing white noise, for example, instead of just relying on increasing the volume. Again, then around that perfect 60-second shot, maybe you looked at your script, maybe you said, consider if you can kind of just crop that out of your video. That does create a little bit of, maybe you moved a little bit and so it's obvious that you cropped something out, but you can maybe overlay that with some words or a relevant image so that it's not so visible to your viewer. I do have some additional tools and resources. So since you will be getting the slides, I'll leave these for you to review after. It just goes over some, different free options for tutorials or different tools to create graphics or find photos and sounds that are Creative Commons licensed. And I know Lauren will talk about the importance of that in a bit. Finally, I'd encourage you to take a look at examples. We have 38 videos from the last 2 years of GRADflix. So I'd really encourage you to watch at least a couple of those. You'll get the links in the slides, but I'll also put them in the chat for you here. And as you're watching them, consider, what worked or didn't work. Was there anything distracting? But were you able to hear the audio well and read the text easily, and really then incorporate that into your own planning for your video? So that's all I have. So I'll turn it back to Rachel, and then I'm happy to answer questions when we get to the Q&A at the end.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. Next on deck, we have Elise, who's going to talk to us about how we actually communicate effectively in these 60-second videos. And just a reminder that we are still going to be answering questions at the end after these presentations are done. So keep your questions coming in the Q&A, and I will turn it over to Elise.
Great. Okay. I assume everything is on screen and working fine. Yay. Okay. So yes, hi, I'm Elise. I'm from the Writing and Communication Center, and we are so happy to support this kind of project. I'll be participating in the drop-ins as well, and you're always welcome to make an appointment or attend the WCC virtual drop-ins, which happen weeknights for any stage of help with this. We are so excited to work on it. Today, I'm going to give you a kind of quick overview of some foundational concepts that will help you when you're making decisions about what to include, what not to include, because you're working on a thesis length project, right? At the very least, it's 30 to 50 pages, and some of you are working on something that's like 200 pages long. And condensing that into a minute can seem like a really impossible task, but actually, if you pay attention to some really basic foundational concepts, some basic ideas, you can make those decisions more easily. So we're going to talk about using your knowledge of your audience and your goals to help shape what it is you want to include. We'll talk about a couple of different ways you can think about structuring your stories. And then we'll also finish off with a kind of quick description of this idea of multimodal communication, which is when you communicate using more than one mode, right? So a video includes image and color and movement and audio and voice and text and all those different things, and they work together to communicate rather than just one at a time. So we're starting with a discussion of audience and purpose, and you already know a sort of general thing about your audience. This is one of the things that is sort of true for all GRADflix videos, right? Your audience is other scholars, other academics who are intelligent, smart, people who think a lot about research in general, but are not necessarily in your field or even in your discipline, right? So you're talking to other scholars, but if you're a math student, you might be talking to someone from the French department. And so you have to think about how their ability to understand certain academic concepts doesn't mean that they know everything about what you're doing, but it also means that you don't have to oversimplify some things like what research is. You can sort of assume that everyone knows that. So no matter who you are, your audience is going to be the sort of academic, non-specialist, intelligent person from a different discipline, probably. But I encourage you, while you're making your plans, while you're starting to think about this GRADflix video, I encourage you to ask yourself some more questions about how this audience might relate to your research. So think about what these people might care about. What do academics at the University of Waterloo care about? What do they share? What is important to us as scholars here? And think about what they might already know about your research, what they might already care about, what misconceptions they might have, or even what things they might be resistant to, right? What ideas do you need to communicate that they're not immediately going to sort of believe and trust you on? What are you going to need to prove to them? And if you spend a few minutes doing this, even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes, you can sort of write down a bullet point list of things that you know or can guess about your audience that can help you when you're trying to decide, do I need to define this term? Well, my audience has a basic idea of what this is, but they actually probably have a misconception about this term. So if I want to use it, yeah, I probably do need to define it, right? Do I need to explain what a dissertation is? Probably not, right? Those kinds of questions, you can always come back to this list and check up on what's worth including or not. Similarly, I want you to spend some time writing out your goals. So we have an overall goal. Everyone in this competition has a goal of communicating their research. Some of you may want to win as well. Those are good goals to have. But I also want you to think about what your specific goal for this video, for this audience is, because this is where you're going to get the meat of what it is you're doing, right? This is where you're going to get ideas about what's worth including. How should you tell this story, right? So do you want to convince people that there's a problem that needs to be solved, or do you want to make people excited about the future of this research? Do you want people to feel empathy and care about a tragedy that's happening? Or do you want them to share your delight and joy at the experience of discovering something new? Right? Those kinds of goals will help you decide, am I taking a serious tone? Does it make sense to include an animation here? Should I use a picture from a stock photo database, or should I make my own images? Those kinds of decisions, there's no right answer to them, right? It all depends on what it is you want to do. And I would encourage you to go with something that feels natural to you, right? I'm a pretty silly, lighthearted person. So if I did something like this, I would probably focus on making people feel joy and excitement. And I'd try to make them laugh and put some lighthearted things in there, but that might not work for your research. So the reason why I spend so much time talking about these things is that it's the answers to these kinds of questions that's going to make your video yours, that it's going to make it special and something that makes your audience care about your research and you specifically. So it is going to be difficult to pare your thesis down to a minute of video. A minute is not as long as you think it is, especially a minute of video is not as long as you think it is, because you're not going to be talking for 60 seconds straight. You're going to have some pauses. You may have things on screen that do something different for a few moments. So it's not a simple matter of writing a minute of script. You have to really come back to the basics of your research. And the great thing about this is that no matter where you are in your research project, those basics are still important, right? They might change over time, but the basic goal of your research and the things you want to achieve with it, you can come up with those answers whether you're just starting or whether you're at the end of your research project. So one of the strategies we encourage people to use is actually a strategy that we use when people are trying to identify what it is they want to do with their research. And that's this 3-stage question that's on the slide here. I'm working on something because I want to find something out to help my audience understand something about that topic. And it's up to you to fill this in with something that's specific, right? Not so detailed that only a specialist can understand, but specific enough that it's meaningful. So, in my research, maybe I'm working on studying queer hockey fans, right? That's a fairly specific name of what it is my research is about, because I want to find out, why they're fans of a sport that's otherwise pretty homophobic, because I want to help my audience understand how fandom works in ways that are maybe sometimes surprising and don't seem logical, right? These are answers that I can give and I can use to help make my choices. So how you answer this question, again, totally up to you. There's no right or wrong answer as long as it's related to your research. But if you write things like your audience, your purpose, and your core message down, and you have it on like a sticky note or something that you can put up next to your monitor as you're working, you can always look back and use it as a kind of touchstone, so that while you're making these decisions, you're making them with the aim of communicating your core message to an audience in order to achieve something from that act of communication, whether it's convincing people to change their minds, making people excited, or just teaching them something that they didn't know already. So this is a really necessary step. And if you come to a WCC appointment, we can help you work out this step, but this is also probably the kind of thing that we would ask you first. What is it you're trying to communicate? Who are you speaking to? Why do you want to speak to them? Those are all really important questions to ask. And I want to sort of end this first stage of talking about audience and purpose with a reminder that just because we're asking you to speak simply or communicate simply doesn't mean we're asking you to trivialize your work, right? Remember, your audience is other academics. So they value research, right? They value They value well-structured, founded work that is scholarly. And so we're not asking you to pretend like your work isn't as important as it is or meaningful as it is, but we are asking you to hone in on something that helps you tell that story quickly and effectively. And so one thing you can do is sort of narrow in on a specific person, scene, or event that illustrates what it is you're trying to do. So think in metaphors, maybe, right? Consider using references. This is like something else. This is another way of doing something that we're all very familiar with, right? Hone in on something specific and unique about your message rather than trivializing your research, because we do want to learn what's exciting about what it is that you're doing. So once you have a good sense of your message and your goal, it's time to start thinking about the story that you want to tell. And there are lots of different ways to do this, right? If you've watched any 3-minute thesis videos, that structure will work well as well, although 3 minutes is longer than 1 minute. But the elevator pitch is also a really effective structure when you're trying to quickly communicate information to an interested but non-expert audience. So an elevator pitch, right, is named as such because you're supposed to be able to pitch your research to your audience while your elevator's going from floor 1 to floor 12. You've only got that time, that's all you have, and it's up to you to make a convincing pitch to who it is you're talking to. And elevator pitches tend to follow a sort of simple 3-act structure, right? You hook the audience in with something surprising, with a question, with a problem, with something that makes them curious or makes them want to learn more, right? So did you know that 29% of blah, blah, blah does something horrifying? Or have you ever had this problem? Isn't it such a relatable problem? Those kinds of hooks that get people to go, oh yeah, or oh my goodness, that's so surprising. Get them interested and curious. Then you have their attention. So you can describe how your work solves that problem or addresses the issue or clarifies something confusing. You can show how your work is directly relevant to the thing that you just made them curious about. And then finally, you have a sort of last chance to cement your ideas in their hearts and minds. So you want to show how your work is relevant to something that the audience cares about. Ideally, you want to make them feel something, right? You want to make them feel excited. You want to make them feel curious, somber, worried, concerned, anything like that. Any feeling that you can genuinely, authentically tap into is going to be helpful, right? Video is an emotional medium. It's not just words on a page, although words themselves can also be emotional. Video includes all the stuff that makes people human, right? It's your body language, your voice, sounds, movement, experience of the world. And so take advantage of that. Now, you might not have the kind of research that sort of naturally fits into a kind of problem solution structure. You can still use the elevator pitch, right? It doesn't have to be super like, here's a problem and here's how I'm going to solve it. It can be, here's a question and here's how I'm going to answer it. But you might also pay attention to the natural storytelling structure that we use as humans when we're talking about things. So the narrative arc is a really persuasive structure for getting people to care about things. The basic of this storytelling structure is that something or someone is the star. Something happens to that star, that main character, to change them in some way, and they return to the world having changed themselves and having changed the world in somehow. So if you think about, fairy tales, once upon a time, there was a person, then something happened, then they did something because of this, and then they returned home having changed something about themselves. It's introduction, rising action, climax, the sort of big moment where something important happens, and some sort of falling action and resolution where we show, here's how this matters to the big picture of the world. So you can also blend this with something like an elevator pitch, right? By creating a sense that something is happening, something is changing. And if you can come up with a story for your research, right? A story doesn't have to be fictional. It can be a true story. It'll be more memorable, more engaging for your audience. And of course, I really want you to think about the flavor that you can add to the story of your research. This is the feeling, the emotion, the passion, the relationships that exist between ideas and causes and effects, those things that make your research yours, right? So if you are the kind of person who's comfortable expressing your excitement, lean into that. Be excited about your work, right? Be the kind of person that other people want to hear their research from. Now, when you are trying to decide how to fit all of your ideas in 1 minute, I really want you to think in terms of removing and refocusing rather than sticking more words in, because, bear with me, although it is possible to cram more words in if you speak faster and never breathe and cut every gap between words so that you fill every moment in time with speech and therefore more ideas and more meaning and more content and more and more and more and more and more, doesn't actually mean that you're communicating better. In fact, you're making it harder for everyone to follow what you're saying, figure out what your ideas are, right? Instead of cramming in more words, give your audience space to actually understand what's happening. The easiest way to do this, to figure out what you actually need to communicate versus what you want to say or versus all the words that you think are necessary, is to talk to someone else about it. So this is why I encourage you to visit the Writing Communication Center, to come to the drop-ins, having someone else take a look at what you're saying and go, well, I feel like by the time I got to this sentence, I already understood this concept. You don't need to say it to me again. Or actually, you skim over this idea really fast, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Showing your work to someone else is the best way to decide what you need to include, remove, refocus, recontextualize, all that kind of stuff. So finally, I want to talk to you a bit about this concept of multimodal communication, which is communication that is sort of greater than the sum of its parts because it includes multiple different kinds of communication. So when you think about what's included in a video, right, it's not just text and sound, or it's not just images and sound. Sometimes it's static images, sometimes it's animation, sometimes it's a movement, right? You film someone walking down the street. Sometimes it's a talking head. Sometimes it's someone telling a story or coming up with a metaphor. Sometimes it's iconography, it's text. Sometimes it's body language and your facial expression. Sometimes there's music. Sometimes there's ambient noise. All of these things need to be working together to help you communicate your message. So this was already mentioned as something that you should be doing, but I'm going to reinforce the advice that you start with a storyboard. So once you've written down, here's my audience, here's my purpose, here's the key message that I want to communicate, I want you to storyboard your video a couple of different times, right? And so storyboarding is where you use a sort of highly visual snippet of a scene, right? You sketch out what a scene might look like with a little doodle or an icon or a description of the action that's happening at that point in time. And then something like a keyword that reminds you of the message that you're communicating at that point in time. And you can do this in like a slide sorter view on PowerPoint. If you go into the slide sorter view, you can very quickly add big images and not worry too much about formatting it to make it look nice. Or you can use pieces of paper like a sticky note, or if you cut up pieces of printer paper into 4 and use those. I encourage you to use something that's fairly small so that you're not tempted to draw out the whole scene. The goal of storyboarding is sort of quick and dirty drafting and revision. because you want it to be low cost to try things out and make changes. If you spend 3 hours animating something so that it looks perfect, it's going to be a lot harder to not use it, even if it's not the most useful thing for you. Instead, if you can sketch something out on a sticky note, you can move them around, you can throw them out, you can redraw them, and it helps you think about the visual that's going to accompany the message. Because what I would encourage you not to do is write out your whole script and then think, how can I make a video out of this? I want you to be thinking about the video from the start. So how does the sound, the visual, and the ideas, how do all of those things work together to tell a story? I'm going to give a couple of little tips and tricks now about different things that you can use. First, just as the solution is never speak more quickly to fit more words in, if you're struggling to fit in the 60-second time limit, the solution is also very rarely just put those words on screen, right? Reduce the amount of text that you have, reduce the amount of things that are distracting your audience. You know, it can be useful and beneficial to have a snappy sentence or a quick call out, labels for things that are maybe unclear, or if you're using a metaphor or a visual metaphor for something, to say this stands in for that. That's helpful, right? A quick keyword that someone can just sort of look at and in a half a second, understand what's going on. But if you're asking them to read something on screen while you're talking to them or while you're explaining something else, you're splitting their attention. So reduce the amount of text. That's probably a great plan. If your research includes data visualization of any kind, that's awesome, great, use it, very helpful, but remember that you're not publishing this in a journal article. So your graph shouldn't be a fully plotted, perfectly formatted table that shows every single data point and every single grid line. Your audience is not going to have the time to understand what's happening. So simplify it, right? Use color to make the trend lines stand out. Reduce the amount of information you show so that your key message comes across. One tool that's recently gotten a lot of attention for its usefulness in communicating COVID spread, which is what you see on screen here, is a bar chart race created in Flourish Studio. So it's app.flourish.studio. It's free with watermarks, but why not? And you can make an animation of data over time that's really appealing. Or not, you don't have to. Because you may not have the kind of research that creates data, that doesn't mean you don't have ways to show your research visually. As someone who studies English, it's taken me a while to sort of understand this, that like, I don't have data, how do I show my research? Well, you use it using various other kinds of images, right? Maybe you take screenshots of things, or you take pictures of people doing the thing that you're talking about. Maybe if, you know, you're talking about narrative arcs, you have a GIF of someone writing out the word hero. You can also, if you're not an artist, there are so many places on the internet that offer free, licensable images. And so I have a sort of rolling collection. I add to it as I find things. So the formatting isn't perfect, but if you go to bit.ly/stock photos, etc., with those capital letters, you'll see stock photo sites, you'll see stock video sites, illustration sites, places that offer images for free, licensed, right? So most of these are Creative Commons or just require attribution. The one I'm currently obsessed with is blush.design. Super, super cute animation, illustrations in a whole bunch of different styles that are like mix and matchable. So you can decide how the people look. What I changed, the puppy used to be a plant. I chose the cute little space buns for the hair. You can sort of add your own personal style in something that doesn't look like clip art, which can be really beneficial. And I also want to plug some of the more diverse or representation focused stock photo sites that I've collected over time. One thing that can really confuse your message is if you're talking, say, about how important it is that something is diverse and we want to have, you know, large groups of people focusing on this, and then your pictures are all just the basic, you know, white dude in a lab coat and a beard standing in front of a chalkboard, that maybe undercuts your message, right? The world is diverse. The world includes people of different races and ethnicities and genders and sexualities, and their bodies look different. And so there are stock photo sites that focus on those. So one of them that I really like is Broadly's Gender Spectrum Collection. So they have different people of different gender identities, some trans people, non-binary people, in a whole bunch of different situations. So I encourage you to think about who it is you're representing if you're using stock photos. To shift from the visual to the audio, I also want you to think about how your voice is going to help you tell your story. So this is where you can let your excitement shine through, right? If you're smiling when you're talking, it's going to sound different than if you're frowning when you're talking. It's hard for me to talk seriously, I apologize. But let your passion shine through. Try not to speak in monotone, right? Monotone is pretty boring and it's very hard to understand what's happening because there's no clues. Speak in a voice that sounds like you're actually talking to another human. And in fact, the way you say things changes the meaning, right? If you say a depressing statistic, but you're like super excited about it, that's just going to be confusing. Whereas you should probably say a depressing statistic in a serious voice, right? Be aware that how you say something is also going to affect how people understand it. And if you are going to be using ambient noise or background music, I also have some options for Creative Commons license, open license sounds that are really awesome for you to use at the same website. Think about how it's going to help you tell your message. So we have on screen here a sort of beautiful shot of some birds flying over a sunset. You might expect to hear geese honking, the sound of water lapping on the shore, something soothing and calming. And so if you hear this instead, some traffic, it's maybe a little confusing. Oh, how do I pause this? There we go. It's maybe a little confusing, but maybe your research is about how urban sprawl destroys natural environments, how urban sprawl makes it hard for animals to experience the world in the way that they want and need to. In that case, maybe that juxtaposition is actually beneficial. So think about what it is you're actually trying to communicate and use that to help you make choices about, well, you know, do I want people to hear what they expect to hear now, or do I want to surprise them? There we go. So you've already been told about how the judging criteria has 50% of the score devoted to communication. And that is a really important thing to remember. Just because you aren't a graphic design wizard doesn't mean you can't succeed in this competition, because really the goal is to communicate your ideas. And if you add on top of that the 30% for your creativity and visual impact, 80% of your score is going to come from your ability to think about how to tell the story, to communicate your message to your audience with the visuals, with the sound, with the movement that you're thinking about. And this is why it's so important to do that scaffolding work. Think about your core message and your purpose, and do a storyboard instead of a script as your first draft. Because it's hard to communicate complex ideas clearly with appropriate terminology to an audience that you don't know personally. It's difficult, but you can give yourself a sort of leg up, a head start by really reflecting on those early questions that we talked about and storyboarding your video so that it's easy for you to make those kinds of choices and decisions without feeling like you've wasted a lot of time. So my last plug come visit us at the Writing Communication Center. We are online. We are here for you. November and December are sometimes pretty busy for us with grad students, but we do have our virtual drop-in sessions as well. We have our design and deliver workshops, which include useful information similar to the kinds of things I was talking about today. And of course, our virtual drop-in appointments. And of course, the drop-ins for GRADflix. So I'm happy to help in any way. And that's what I have for you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elise, for sharing lots and lots of good information for how to communicate effectively. I'm sure it's going to be really helpful for a lot of our participants. So next we have Lauren Bile, who's going to talk to us about copyright. So super important. You can communicate effectively, but if you aren't copywriting and taking that seriously, you could risk some academic integrity stuff. So we're going to hear from Lauren. We will also, we're running near to the end of our session that has been scheduled, but we will stay a little bit extra for any Q&A that you guys have. So stay tuned for that. And I will hand it over to Lauren. Thanks, Elise.
Thanks, Rachel. Just getting my screen shared here. There we go. So I'm Lauren Bile. I'm the Copyright and Licensing Librarian. I'm just going to very briefly go through some information about copyright. I'm not going to go through all the slides because we're a bit tight on time, but you'll have access to this information and I believe a handout that Sarah linked to in the slides as well. So basically what we want to think about is what can we use in our videos and how do we go about making sure that we either have the appropriate permission or that the content is already cleared or appropriate to use under a Copyright Act exception. And so really what we're thinking about is, does a copyright owner, would they be okay with us using the content? Because it is their right to produce, reproduce, or publish the work. And so when we think about copyright, we think about, we either have to ask the copyright owner or creator if we can produce, reproduce, or publish their work, or we have to be able to use a Copyright Act exception in order to do so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to breeze through the times when you don't need permission, which is really what we want to focus on here today, because ideally you're focusing on all of the other important elements of your video, figuring about how you want to communicate and how to get all of the wonderful business of your research into 1 minute. So I'm hoping that this information will help you make sure that you're not spending a whole bunch of time thinking about copyright. So the first time you don't need copyright is when you're using a fact or idea. Facts or ideas aren't copyright protected. So a good example of that is something simple like a mathematical equation, a fact like yellow and red make orange, but perhaps in the context you might be thinking of something like a fact of what happened at in a news report, like the driver of a car was wearing a blue shirt. That fact on its own is not copyright protected. The news article is, so the curation of all of the facts that happened around that accident in the report would be copyright protected, but the individual item is not. Things that are in the public domain, so things where copyright is expired, also aren't protected by copyright, so you can use them without permission. So those are usually very old things. So they're things where the author has passed away and has been dead for 50 or more years. So for example, on this slide, we have Popeye. The creator of Popeye, Elzie Ziegler, died in 1939. And so Popeye and the related cartoons are in the public domain. As Elise mentioned quite a bit, there are a number of Creative Commons licensed content out there. If you don't know what Creative Commons is, it's simply a licensing system that is designed authors or creators to say, you can use this in specific ways, and you don't have to ask me if you use it in the ways that I've outlined here. It's really meant for authors to say, I'd like to openly share this. I don't want you to ask me permission if you do X, Y, Z. So this chart in particular can be helpful for understanding the different Creative Commons licenses. What you really want to look for is really any of these, but particularly avoiding anything that has the last one on the list here. So Creative Commons BY, NC, ND. The ND means no derivatives, which means that you can't include it in something else or change it or adapt it in any way, which often is something that happens as you're creating a video. This last example here is a Copyright Act exception. So the other few things there were things where copyright has either been waived by the creator or copyright no longer exists because of the way that the act is created. A Copyright Act exception is something that the Act allows you to do without asking permission, but it's important to note that using a Copyright Act exception is a bit of it's a defense to copyright infringement, and so you're already assuming when you go to use the work that you would, if you weren't using this exception, have to ask permission. So you don't need to use Copyright Act exceptions on things in the public domain, Creative Commons license things, or facts or ideas. So this particular exception is called the non-commercial user-generated content exception, and is much more fun when you think about it as the YouTube exception. So really what it's about is using other people's works in a new work of your own. Sometimes folks also call it the mashup exception. And it comes with a number of requirements that you're using the third party or someone else's work for non-commercial purposes. And for the purposes of this contest, we're going to say this is a non-commercial purpose. You're not creating it in order to sell it to someone else. You need to mention the source where you got it from. You could do that in something as simple as a final references slide in your video. You need to use a legal version of the work. So you don't want to be sourcing it from a pirated or illegal copy you found on the internet. You want to go to the original source of the content. And then you need to sort of be sure that your use of the work won't have any substantial adverse effect or a negative impact on the creator. So if you're, for example, using a product in a video that it explains how horrible the product is, that may be likely to have a substantial adverse effect on the original creator. And then finally, and probably most importantly, if you don't understand any of this, that's perfectly fine. You can ask me. And the way to do so is to send an email to copyright@uwaterloo.ca. I'd also recommend the handout Sarah's linked to, as it includes a number of different sources of Creative Commons licensed videos, images, and music to get started with. I can't provide legal advice, but I can try to start you off on the right spot and help you make a good decision on your own. And that's all for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren, for providing us with all those details about copyright. So we'll jump into the question and answer. It is 3:30, so if you have to leave, that is okay, but we will continue to answer some of your questions. So some of the questions that have been coming through the Q&A, kind of just around the structure of the competition. We have someone wondering if it is across all departments or if each department will be having their own competition. So maybe Angela can answer that.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the question. You're probably thinking immediately of the 3-minute thesis competition where we have faculty-based heats and department-based heats, but for GRADflix, there is no other level beyond the final. So you submit your videos to GSPA, we submit them to the judges, and any that score high enough to make it to the final, make it directly to the final. So there's no other level of the competition, but great question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. So we have another question around your research stage. Does it matter which stage your research is in? Do you need to share results in your video? That kind of question. So I'm not sure who can answer that best.
I can start, and then I think I'll pass it to Elise really quickly. So briefly, there is no requirement that you have to be at a certain stage of your program. So in the rules, we've had participants who've just started their master's or PhD, and so there's no requirement there. But in terms of tips for strategizing around that, if you don't have research results yet, I'll pass that over to Elise quickly.
Sure, yeah. So it's definitely possible to give an engaging presentation no matter what stage of the research you're at. Because this is a 1-minute video, you're not going to be going into super details anyway. So if you do have your results, you're going to want to hone it in on like the result that is the most appealing or interesting, or the sort of big idea that you need to communicate. So if you're early in your stage, and you don't necessarily know what answers you're going to find, you might want to focus on the questions that you're asking and why those questions are important, or what you hope your results will be and what effect that will have on the world, or why this is research worth focusing on in order to find the answers to those questions, or to discover something new and interesting and exciting or whatever. So depending on what stage of your research you're at, you might focus on something different. But the key message of your research that, you know, I'm studying this because I want to find out in order to help my audience understand, that doesn't require results, right? All it is what is it that you're studying? Why is it interesting? And why should your audience care? And if you can answer those questions, you can come up with your 1-minute video.
Awesome. All right, another question maybe around copyright. Someone is asking if a watermark on an animated video is acceptable. And I think there was another question that was something around that, or taking pictures from Google in your animated video. Do you need to give reference to that at the end? Maybe Lauren can answer that one.
So in terms of watermarked things, usually stock photo providers and those kinds of folks use watermarks as a way to discourage you from using the images without getting a license first. But like in Lisa's example, there are folks who offer their free service with a watermark simply as a way of marketing their business. Those two examples are very different. So if you're you know, screen capping a stock photo site to get their watermarked image without paying to download it, that wouldn't be okay. If you're using the bar chart race from, I forget what that service was called, but if you're using that and you don't want to pay for the full price one, but you include the watermark, that's perfectly fine. That's their intent, right? Is to sort of market and get the word out there by forcing you to include the watermark. I don't know if it was sort of another question about, is it okay from the GSPA standpoint to have watermarks in your video? That I can't answer. The other question was
around using Google Images and how to cite that.
Fair enough. Okay, so using images you find from Google Images is a bit tricky because you really want to be making sure that you're using a legal source of the image in order to make use of any Copyright Act exceptions. That said, there are tools in Google Images to filter the results to Creative Commons only images. I can send a link later to show you exactly how to do that, because when I'm thinking about trying to explain it in Google right now, it won't go very well. But there definitely are a number of different tools, either in Google or Flickr or other image-based sites, to filter down to just those Creative Commons ones. And always citation is your best bet. And that sort of final reference slide I find is the best way to accomplish those sorts of things.
Great. So maybe I'll pass the question to Angela. How much help can we get from others? Say, can I use my friend's voice in my video? Maybe my friend's really good at video editing. Can they do it for me? How much help can we get?
I'll just briefly pass it to Sarah to see if she can answer the question, the previous question about watermarks and what our guidelines are around that.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So GSP doesn't have any rules against you using images or things that have watermarks, provided, of course, that you're following everything that Lauren has mentioned around making sure that you're okay in terms of copyrights. I would mention, though, and encourage you to consider about how that might impact the quality of your video. While the guidelines, you're fine submitting something that has a watermark on it. Think about whether that might distract from anything else you have on the slides. If there's some text on the slide, does it maybe, make that a little bit less front and center? So I'd encourage you to think if there's an alternative you could use that doesn't have the watermark, but certainly from a rules perspective, you're completely fine having that in there.
Thanks, Sarah. And to just follow up on Rachel's last question, thanks, Rachel, about can you use, can you repeat the question actually, Rachel?
Yeah, so how much help are participants allowed to get from others? So say, can a friend do the voiceover or help with editing, that kind of thing?
Of course, yeah. So our rules stipulate that the video is, by submitting a video, you're agreeing that this is an original work created by you. That said, I think if you wanted to ask a friend, they have a really great voice, like Rachel does. She's a singer on the side. She has a band. We use her voice for our videos. That's okay, as long as you're the one who storyboarded the video, created the video, decided which images to use. You're talking about your research. I think that's okay. So just make sure that this is ultimately an original work created by you, and you're fine. The other thing I'll mention is, I think it was last year we had one of our competitors, Michelle, she actually used paid images and footage actually to incorporate in her video, and the video turned out really well. So she opted to pay for some footage, and that's okay. She actually was able to string it together into what was an original work created by her. It was her voice. She included images of herself. She's the one who told the story about the images that we were seeing, and so that makes it an original work created by her. So if Sarah has that link, she can throw it in the chat for you, just so you can see the different ways that you can create a video while borrowing other voices or other footage.
Awesome. All right, maybe just a couple more questions. Maybe this one can be around communication for Elise. Do you have any specific recommendations for students whose research is on a sensitive topic, for example, on youth suicidal ideation?
That's a great question. So I would say I don't have a magic bullet answer for that. I think that is something that you want to think about very carefully, what messages you want to communicate. So, if your goal is to get people to think about this or to understand it from a different perspective, you'll want to use that similar kind of empathy when you are creating your work, right? So you'll want to maybe not glorify things or make it too showy, to use the appropriate tone. So it's kind of a non-answer, but the answer to that question is to consider what message you want to communicate. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with a bit of a content warning at the start, to give people that opportunity to gauge their own ability to engage with the content. I think people would respect that. And certainly, giving a content warning, showing your awareness of how your audience might feel, creates trust, right? If you surprise people with something that's going to hurt them or upset them in a way that is maybe dangerous, that's not a trustworthy thing to do. So think about what message and image you want to provide. But I think it's great that you're thinking about it, and certainly having a sensitive topic doesn't mean you can't talk about it at all. It just means that you should use that sensitivity and care that I expect is in your research, in your video as well.
Great, thanks Elise for that helpful advice. So we'll just wrap it up with maybe one more question. Maybe I'll open up the floor. So this could be answered by many of the panelists. May I know what are visual effects more important, or is the content of research more important? So I'll open up to anybody.
I'm gonna throw that one to Elise first.
Cool.
Sure. So I would say I encourage you not to think about them as entirely separate things, but I'll sort of answer in a couple of different ways. The first way is by content, do you mean like the actual research that you're conducting and the ideas, or the way that you're communicating those ideas? You don't have to have a perfectly fully formed dissertation to be able to do this, right? You can still have questions, open things that you don't know how to answer, results that you haven't completely figured out yet. Those are exciting things to other scholars, so that's okay. But in terms of which should you pay more attention to, how nice it looks on screen, or how you communicate it using images and words and text and all that kind of stuff. Focus on communicating your message clearly, rather than spending hours and hours or even tons of money making it look super flashy, right? We would rather get an authentic, interesting, understandable message than something that looks like you paid you paid lots of money to have produced really nicely, right? So focus on communicating your message, but don't think that you're adding images to your research. You're using video to help communicate your research.
Very nice. Does anybody else want to touch on that topic?
I'll say Elise is probably the best expert on that.
Yeah, no, that's
you
good.
know,
That's
so
good.
I think, you know, when we watch it, and this is where coming in, taking advantage of the training sessions, the drop-in sessions is great. Last year when we did the training sessions, it was me and Sarah, and we had Lauren on standby for copyright questions, and we had Elise's team there, and you were able to get different kinds of feedback, and sometimes the feedback you got didn't agree with each other, and I think that's really valuable for you so that you can hear the feedback, consider it, and then move forward. So I guess I would just say take advantage of those drop-in sessions. Absolutely take advantage of the fact that the Writing and Communication Center is an amazing resource for our grad students. They will book an appointment now if you're planning on doing this, because like Lisa said, they're very busy this time of year for grad students, and just take advantage. Like, we're here to support you. We love this competition. We love what you're all able to produce by way of your videos, and everyone here on the screen is here to support you. So take advantage of all of the supports we have.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. That wraps things up really, really nicely. I'll just open up the floor if anybody else has any lasting thoughts to share. Otherwise, we'll get into the closing remarks. Looks good.
I will I see there was one question we didn't get to that was really just around like what kind of support can students get. So I'll just maybe say a little bit more about what we do in the drop-in. So there were some people last year who were doing videos in PowerPoint. So I was able to, help provide that technical support. Like Angela said, we can provide that feedback there. It really, whatever you're working on, we're happy to help you and provide feedback. The only thing I will just say is we don't have expertise necessarily on if you're using other kinds of platforms or softwares, but I'd encourage you to look up the resources that are available to you. The University of Waterloo has free access to LinkedIn Learning. So there's lots of really great tutorials on there for actually different software platforms. So if you're stuck on something, reach out. There will be somewhere that we can point you to help with that.
Great. Awesome. So yeah, like Sarah said, there are some drop-ins coming up in December, and we can share the links there in the chat with you guys. So those are coming up. There's 2 separate ones, and we'll have all our experts there to help. And of course, you can always go to our resources page for more information, where you will also be able to find the recording of this session. So you can re-listen to all the great tips that were shared today. just a reminder that the registration deadline to compete is November 20th, so that's coming up in a couple of weeks, so keep that in mind. And if you would like to register, do it as soon as you can. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you everybody for joining us today and asking all your great questions and for staying a little bit over time. Really appreciate it. Thank you to Angela and Sadaf who left earlier, but thank you to her for sharing her experience. Thank you, Sarah, Elise, and Lauren for being here to answer all these questions. And just a quick reminder that you will be prompted to fill out a post-session survey, feedback survey, and we do appreciate all of your feedback. So we encourage you to fill that out. It'll help us a lot. So yeah, that brings us to the end. Thank you so much and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. All right.